I heard the intern's pregnant. Wonder who the lucky guy is. Laughter. Sharp, nasal, wine-drenched laughter. Someone slapped the table hard enough that their glass of Merlot tipped and bled across the white linen. I was still frozen in my seat, the fork halfway to my mouth. The shrimp skewer stared back at me, pitifully unaware that it would be the only thing that night untouched by venom. The slideshow was still playing on the wall behind me. Fake screenshots. Text bubbles with my name saying things I never wrote. You looked amazing in that pencil skirt today. Let's meet in the copy room after lunch. Winky face. A selfie I never took, doctored with a woman's silhouette standing too close, her ID badge blurred, but just enough to let imaginations run wild. The background was clearly my office. I'd seen that pothose plan in the corner every morning for 11 years. The punchline? A deep fake video, edited with laugh tracks and emoji overlays. My face spliced over some B-movie sex scene, awkwardly thrusting while a moaning voice yelled, "Zoning board can wait." They roared. Full on, doubled over, spit-dribbling laughter. Even the city treasurer wiped tears from his eyes. His wife nudged him, giggling. Told you Paul had a wild side. I didn't say a word. Just sat there, blinking through the projection light, my throat dry, trying to decide which feeling to focus on. Nausea, rage, confusion, or shame. In the end, none of them won. Numbness did. Rachel sat beside me, cheeks flushed from wine and attention. She raised her glass and winked at the crowd. Come on. He's not mad. It's his birthday. Loosen up, Paul. She leaned in, the smell of Cabernet and self-congratulation seeping from her pores. It's just a prank, babe. Everyone knows you'd never actually screw the intern. Then, under her breath, just for me. Although you do look at her like you'd like to. I turned to her. Slowly. Her smile faltered. What did you do? I asked, low enough that only she could hear. Oh, relax, she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. You're too sensitive. I had to spice things up. You've been so boring lately. That word. Boring. It landed harder than any of the lies on screen. I stood up. Someone whistled. Oh, the man of the hour is mad. No, Rachel said quickly, waving her hands. He just needs some air. He'll be back. Paul, sit down. The cake's coming. But I didn't look back. I walked past the rows of fake friends and civic parasites who'd gladly laughed at my public flaying. Past Councilman Hardy, who muttered something like, "That's what happens when you marry someone hotter than you." Past the mayor, whose face was already sour, eyes glued to his phone, probably crafting a statement about inappropriate content and respect in public office. He left before dessert. The rest stayed, pretending not to notice the empty chair. The intern quit the next morning. No letter. No email. Just vanished. I later heard from a secretary she moved back to her parents' place upstate, crying that her career was ruined. The HR department issued a memo about sensitive content and workplace integrity, which was a polite way of saying, we're covering our ass because someone turned a city planner into a punchline. By noon, my inbox was frozen. Someone in IT said I'd been flagged for review. My keycard stopped working by 3 p.m. I didn't argue, didn't beg, didn't even pack my desk. I left my mug, world's okayest planner, next to the filing cabinet and walked out with nothing but the clothes on my back and a worn copy of Silent Spring tucked in my coat pocket. At home, Rachel was already planning a follow-up party, something she called Paul's Redemption Roast. I found the flyer in the trash the day before. New jokes, real closure, BYOB, and ice cream cake. The RSVP list was growing. She didn't even ask why I was home early. She just yelled from the kitchen, "Don't forget, the cleaner's coming tomorrow. Try not to leave your boring papers all over the table again." That night, while she snored, I pulled my old briefcase from the closet, removed the lining, and opened the small false bottom I'd once built out of paranoia. Inside, a hard drive, a burner phone, cash in sealed envelopes, a folded post-it note with a name and address I hadn't thought about in years. I stood over the bed for a long moment. She snorted in her sleep, rolled over, and mumbled, "You should smile more, Paul. It's just a prank." I left before the sun came up. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't leave a note. The next morning, when Rachel came down and saw the front door ajar and the coffee pot cold, she probably thought I'd gone for a walk. She wouldn't realize I wasn't coming back until her friends started texting. "Is Paul okay? He seemed off last night. Was that stuff real?" By the end of the week, she'd be fielding questions from reporters, HR, legal, the mayor's assistant, all wanting to know what the hell happened. But by then, I'd already deleted Paul Hall from existence. The cake sat in the break room fridge for 3 days before someone threw it out. Vanilla, white frosting, blue icing that read, "Happy 62nd, Paul," with a little fondant clipboard beside it. No one touched it. Not out of respect. Paul was no longer the kind of man people respected, but because nobody wanted to be the one caught eating a slice of scandal. The Monday after the roast, Paul's office was sealed. Literally. The glass door to planning and infrastructure had a sticky note that read, "Temporarily closed for audit," but everyone knew what it meant. His nameplate was gone. His inbox bounced back every message with a curt, "Delivery failed. User unknown." His chair was gone too, replaced by a folding stool, as if even the furniture was being disciplined. Rachel woke up that morning alone. Not alone like he got up early to beat traffic, but alone like his side of the closet was empty. No dress shoes. No ties. The watch he wore every day for 20 years, a dull silver fossil with the face scratched near the 11, was missing from the tray by the sink. He'd taken exactly 3 things. The watch, the brown leather briefcase with the cracked handle, and a small black umbrella that had belonged to his father. Left behind, 2 wedding albums, a bottle of heart medication, and a manila folder labeled "House, Deed Rachel." She found it on the kitchen table. It was signed, notarized, filed, ownership, transferred, mortgage, paid, debt, 0. The house was hers. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there in a tank top and pajama pants with a coffee mug that read, "Yes, I'm still the boss." She read the paperwork 3 times, her hand shaking slightly each time she turned a page. Then, with an almost childlike disbelief, she said aloud to no one, "He really left?" No note. No dramatic scene. No final fight. No bag thrown in anger or "You'll regret this." Just gone. By Wednesday, the whispers started. Linda from the zoning office told someone at the farmer's market that Paul was in some kind of breakdown. A guy from city maintenance said he saw Paul at the Greyhound station, wearing jeans and a windbreaker, boarding a bus to somewhere flat. Rachel's Pilates partner claimed she heard from someone at the bank that Paul liquidated everything. Checking, savings, retirement. Every account. Cleaned. Out. On Friday, Rachel went to the office herself. She wore a navy blazer and her best smile, the one that worked at charity dinners. She brought croissants for the secretaries. She knocked on the mayor's door, all poise and confidence. "Just here to clear the air," she said with a chuckle. "You know Paul. He gets in these moods. He'll turn up." The mayor didn't look up from his monitor. "We're handling it internally." "What does that mean?" He did look up then. Finally, his expression was something between pity and irritation. "It means we've moved on. I suggest you do too." By the end of the following week, Rachel's calendar was empty. The brunches stopped. The text slowed. Someone from the PDA forgot to loop her in about a committee vote. Even at the co-op, people smiled too quickly, laughed too loudly, trying too hard not to mention the elephant that had once been her husband. She called Paul's sister in Oregon. "Have you heard from him?" A pause. Then, "Did something happen?" Rachel hung up. Every night, she reread old emails, trying to find a clue. Something angry. Something broken. There was nothing. His last message to her, 2 days before the party, had been a shared calendar invite. Waterboard meeting, 3 p.m. Friday. That was it. That was Paul. Dull. Predictable. Boring. As she'd so lovingly said, over and over again. But boring men don't vanish like ghosts. They don't scrub themselves clean in a single day. They don't leave behind perfect paperwork and untraceable exits. Unless they've been preparing. By the end of the month, a brief statement appeared on the mayor's website. Just 3 sentences. "In light of recent events, we reaffirm our commitment to professionalism and respect across all departments. We regret the circumstances surrounding Mr. Hall's departure. Further comment is not available at this time." Rachel read it 5 times. Nowhere in it was the word sorry. Nowhere in it was the word wrong. She scrolled down and saw the next announcement. Something about upcoming renovations to the Civic Auditorium. Paul had been slated to oversee that project. Now, another name was listed. A younger man. No mustache. No history. She called the number listed for the Department of Planning. The receptionist answered. "This is Rachel Hall. I need to speak to someone about Paul." "Who?" "My husband. Paul Hall. He worked in planning. This is his wife." A pause. Then, with surgical neutrality, "I'm sorry, ma'am. We don't have any record of an active employee by that name." Click. That night, she opened the wedding album. Page after page of Paul smiling politely in beige suits, always slightly to the left of center. Not the kind of man who draws attention. just the kind who holds things together. Until he didn't. She sat in the dark for a long time, the photo of their first dance balanced on her knees. Her hand hovered over her phone, thinking of texting one of his old colleagues, just to ask, "Have you seen him?" But she didn't, because she already knew the answer. It started with the plaque. Rachel was at City Hall for a recycling initiative meeting, something she attended half-heartedly so people would keep calling her active in the community. She had her sunglasses perched in her hair, a caramel latte in one hand, and a practiced, bored smile on her lips when she walked by the downtown renewal contributors wall. It was a bronze monstrosity installed 5 years ago, listing key project leads and donors in neat serif font. Paul's name had been third from the top. Paul E. Hall, lead planning architect. A permanent tribute, they'd called it. Except now it wasn't there. She stopped walking, stepped back. Gone. No blank space. No scratch marks. Just a newly engraved name where his used to be. Someone named Jasper Denning, whoever the hell that was. She blinked twice, then walked up and pressed her palm against the plaque like she could summon Paul's name back from the metal. It didn't move. Neither did the tightness in her throat. She marched to the front desk. "Yes, hi. Who do I speak to about the downtown wall?" "There's been a mistake." The receptionist gave her that smile. The one that said, "I don't get paid enough for this." "Name? Rachel Hall." Click, click, click. Then a pause. "And the nature of your inquiry?" Paul Hall's name was removed. He was the lead on that entire project. This must be an error. The receptionist didn't answer right away. She tilted her head slightly, eyes flicking to something over Rachel's shoulder, like she was waiting for security to magically appear and solve the Hall problem for her. Finally, she spoke. "You'll need to take that up with HR." "Great," Rachel said, snatching the post-it note she was offered. She never made it to HR. She didn't have to. They called her instead. "Mrs. Hall," the woman said politely. "Unfortunately, we're unable to comment on any internal personnel matters." "I'm not asking for commentary. I'm asking for facts." "Mrs. Hall, I'm sorry, but we've been advised to direct all questions to external counsel moving forward." "External? Wait, are you saying there's legal?" But the line had already gone dead. That night, Rachel opened a bottle of wine alone and laughed. Just once. A dry little sound. It was all so absurd. Paul, who once broke into a sweat arguing over overdue library books, had somehow made himself radioactive. The next morning, her friend Dana texted, "Hey, small thing. Did you by any chance use my work email to send that slideshow?" Rachel stared at the message for a full minute. Her stomach dropped. Months before the party, she'd gotten the idea from a meme, some viral slideshow making fun of a cheating husband. She'd thought it was edgy, maybe even a little empowering. She downloaded the template at Dana's house, and her laptop had issues, so she used Dana's desktop. She'd forgotten all about it. "I might have," she replied. "Why?" Dana didn't answer for hours. Then, we got a letter. From someone's lawyer. Our IT found the file on our shared drive. "Rachel, what exactly was in that thing?" Rachel didn't answer. She was too busy poring over a formal letter that had arrived in her mailbox. Certified mail, cream-colored envelope, no return address. The letterhead was clean. The phrasing was ice. "Alleged defamatory materials created and disseminated by parties under your direct supervision." It was from a law firm she'd never heard of. But the tone was clear. Someone had filed. Or was about to. She called Dana. Straight to voicemail. She called the rest of the party crew, Sarah, Colleen, Jenna. Suddenly no one was picking up. One of them, Jenna, had already blocked her on social. Another had removed all tagged photos from the night of the roast. Just gone. Scrubbed clean. Rachel tried to post something casual, a photo of her brunching with a new group of moms she barely knew. Comments, 0. Likes, 1, probably a bot. Her inbox was a graveyard. Even her mother sent a text that said, "Ratch, maybe just lay low for a while." Her stomach twisted again. Then came the real blow. Paul's pension stopped. The payments that had once trickled into their joint account, because of course Paul never changed the deposit info, just stopped. No notification. No explanation. When she called the city payroll office, they transferred her 3 times before she landed on a voicemail for someone named Janine. No one ever called back. She finally called the number on the legal letter, hands shaking. A smooth voice answered. "Yes. This is Rachel Hall," she said. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No, ma'am," the voice replied. "There's been documentation." "I don't understand. What is this about?" The voice was calm, measured. "It's about consequences, Mrs. Hall." Then silence. Rachel stared at her phone for nearly a full minute before setting it down and walking to the kitchen. She opened the pantry and stared blankly at the shelves. Cans, boxes, jars. Nothing made sense. She sat on the floor and tried to breathe. The prank, the one she thought was harmless, even funny, was unraveling her life thread by thread. Her smug little roast had gone from cocktail party fodder to potential defamation. Her friends were scattering. Her money was drying up. And Paul hadn't said a word. That was the worst part. She hadn't seen his face, hadn't heard his voice, hadn't read so much as a passive-aggressive email. He'd simply erased himself. And somehow, in that silence, he was becoming louder than ever. The investigator's name was Calvin Dorsey. His office was in a strip mall next to a vape shop and a failing martial arts dojo that doubled as a tax prep service during the off-season. He wore a corduroy blazer with suede patches and had a mustache so deliberate it felt like part of a costume. Rachel didn't care. She just wanted someone, anyone, who could find her ex-husband. "I want to be very clear," she said, sliding a photo of Paul across the desk. "He's not dangerous. He's just unwell. This isn't revenge. I just need closure." Calvin gave her a slow nod like he'd heard this 100 times. He flipped the photo over, squinted, and said, "This all you got?" "I have a few old addresses, some bank info, his social." "Good. I'll run it through my systems. Could take a few weeks." She paid in cash. Part of what was left from selling her car. The one Paul had bought her 2 years before the roast. She'd loved telling people it was a gift, just because. Now she'd take an Uber to the PI's office and walked 3 blocks through sleet to get there. 3 weeks later, Calvin called. "Mrs. Hall, we've got a few hits, but nothing solid." "What does that mean?" "It means he's either got friends in very high places, or he planned his exit like a military op." He paused. She didn't speak. Nothing at the DMV. No employment records. No IRS activity under his SSN. The only blip was a debit card withdrawal, $200 in cash, 2 days after your roast party. ATM near a gas station outside Lincoln, Nebraska. That's it. "Could he be dead?" she asked quietly. "No body, no death certificate. He's alive. Somewhere." Rachel sat on her couch that night, wrapped in the throw blanket her sister had crocheted during COVID, sipping ginger tea and scrolling endlessly through forums titled things like Runaway Spouses Anonymous and Ghosted by Marriage. Most were stories about cheaters, secret families, cults. None of them sounded like Paul. He was too boring for that. Or maybe that's exactly what made him dangerous now. A week later, Dana texted her out of the blue. "Don't freak out, but a friend swears she saw Paul." Rachel nearly dropped her phone. "Where?" "A truck stop outside Billings. Cleaning floors. Graveyard shift." Rachel stared at the message, fingers poised above the screen. Then she called Calvin. He was already 2 steps ahead. "Send a guy up there. Talk to the manager." They had someone matching his description, but the name was fake. No W-2. Paid under the table for a few weeks, then disappeared again. Left behind a locker with nothing in it but a copy of The Grapes of Wrath and a toothbrush. "Anything else?" "Yeah," Calvin said. Locker number was 62. Paul's age. Rachel hung up and threw her phone across the room. It didn't break. Of course it didn't. Even her rage had bad aim these days. Over the next month, the leads got weirder. One of Colleen's friends said she'd seen Paul on a fishing boat in Oregon, wearing a thick beard and calling himself Evan. Another claimed he was working as a handyman at a retreat center in Sedona, smelling like pine needles and regret. Every time, Rachel chased it. Every time, it fell apart. She started dreaming about him. In the dreams, Paul never spoke. He just stood in the background, watching her scramble through rooms that were slowly filling with water. Sometimes, he'd tilt his head like he was mildly amused, like he knew something she didn't. She sold the house 3 weeks later. It wasn't out of necessity, not yet, but she couldn't stand the way the place echoed. Every room whispered his name. The guest bathroom still had the weird towel rack he'd installed crooked in 2008. The garage smelled like his cologne and motor oil. The pantry still had his favorite hot sauce, unopened. She'd mocked it once. "You like things mild, Paul. Even your taste buds are boring." Now she stared at the bottle like it might hold a clue. She moved into a small condo across town. 2 bedrooms, gray carpet, no history. She filled the walls with abstract art she didn't understand and candles that smelled like eucalyptus and self-delusion. Dana came by once, took one look at the minimalist furniture, and said, "You live like you're trying to erase your own memory." Rachel didn't answer, just poured wine and handed her the glass. After Dana left, Rachel sat alone and pulled up an old video on her laptop. Her and Paul in New Orleans, years ago. Bourbon Street in the background. Paul wearing a ridiculous straw hat. holding a beignet like it was a national treasure. He turned to the camera and said, "Sometimes disappearing is the only way to be seen." She had laughed back then, thinking it was a joke. Now she wasn't so sure. No forwarding address. No closure. No control. Just an ex-husband who'd turned silence into an entire second life and left her lost in the noise of her own making. The town was small enough to be ignored by maps, big enough to hide in. Grain elevators, Dollar Generals, and silence after 9 p.m. Paul arrived under a name that didn't belong to anyone famous or hunted. Eli Holland. No middle name, no social media, no paper trail beyond a forged birth certificate and a P.O. box 3 counties over. He chose the name like a surgeon selects a scalpel, deliberately, with clean edges and a purpose buried deeper than it looked. He walked into the warehouse in the dead of January, cold enough that your spit would crack before it hit the ground. The job paid $11 an hour and came with steel-toed boots and a neon vest that reeked of nicotine and machine oil. The hiring manager didn't ask questions. Small towns are funny that way. You show up with work ethic and clean fingernails, and they assume your story is the least interesting thing about you. Paul worked nights. He requested them. Less chatter. Fewer eyes. The graveyard shift was filled with lifers who didn't care who you were so long as you stacked pallets without crushing your toes or pissing off the forklift guys. He started quietly, counted inventory with a precision no one asked for, reported leaks in the roof no one else noticed, fixed a broken label printer on his 3rd week using nothing but an old paperclip and a YouTube video. He didn't talk unless asked. He didn't eat lunch with the crew. He didn't join the birthday sheet cake rituals. But he listened. Carefully. He listened when the dock's supervisor complained about trucks idling too long because scheduling was a mess. He listened when the inventory manager cursed the outdated software. He listened when dispatchers argued over mislabeled orders and delayed deliveries. Then, one night, he wrote a letter. Handwritten. No signature. Just a list. Implement barcode system to reduce 22% error rate. Remap storage layout to cut forklift traffic by 37%. Use temperature sensors on high-value perishable goods. Lost $11,000 last quarter. He slipped it under the office door and went back to loading floor tiles. 3 weeks later, a clipboard appeared with a new layout diagram. No announcement. Just changes. He kept writing. 1 letter every 2 weeks. Always unsigned. Always actionable. Eventually, he was called into the office by the owner, a man named Curtis Redner who wore a BOLO tie and spoke in riddles. "You the ghost fixin' my problems?" Curtis asked. Paul shrugged. "Guess ghosts don't talk." Curtis nodded once. "You want to supervise the floor?" Paul shook his head. "Let me stay where I am. I see more from below." Curtis stared at him a long moment, then grunted. Smart ghost. 2 years in, Paul had a badge. Not a vest. He still worked nights, but now he walked the floor with a tablet and a new title, Night Ops Coordinator. He made $37,000 a year and declined every offer to move to day shift. By year 3, Curtis invited him to meetings. By year 4, Paul rewrote the logistics chain for the entire West Corridor, having delays and trimming 30% off labor waste. By year 5, they gave him the title of Regional Ops Director. 3 states, 9 facilities. He made 6 figures. Still no LinkedIn. Still no photos. Still no social media. He bought a modest house near a lake with a long gravel driveway and a reinforced mailbox. Had groceries delivered in cash tips. Ate dinners of lentils and rice. Drank coffee black. Ran 5 miles every morning at 4:30 a.m. Never missed a day. He filed for an LLC under the name Holland Systems. By year 6, he'd quietly begun purchasing shares in Curtis's company through a network of trusts and shell firms. Nothing illegal, just untraceable. He never used a personal email, never signed his real name. When Curtis suffered a stroke in year 7 and the board scrambled for stability, the votes fell to the man with no scandal, no debt, and no enemies. The silent operator who'd never asked for recognition, never broken protocol, and never, ever, left a trail. Paul Hall became CEO of Redner Logistics under the name Eli Holland. No press release, no ribbon cutting. But in the internal memo, sent to department heads across the tri-state network, was a short note. New CEO effective immediately. Proven track record. No further introductions needed. And just like that, the man everyone laughed at, the man everyone had watched get publicly humiliated, now on the company that had once paid him by the hour to scrub diesel stains off concrete floors. His office was plain. No photos on the desk. No awards on the walls. Just a shelf. One object sat on it. A cracked ceramic coffee mug. White. Faded blue lettering. World's okayest planner. He never mentioned it. Never explained it. But every time he looked at it, something in his eyes hardened slightly. Outside that office, Rachel scrolled through her thinning contact list, wondering which bridge had collapsed next. She had no idea the man she'd erased was quietly writing the blueprints of his empire. And he wasn't done. It was a Tuesday, a nothing day, the kind that slips past unnoticed unless something cracks it open like an egg on hot pavement. Rachel was standing in line at the pharmacy, scrolling through her phone to avoid eye contact with the overly chatty woman behind her, when her thumb froze mid-swipe. She didn't know why the headline caught her attention. It wasn't bold or dramatic. Just the quiet man behind a booming infrastructure empire. P. Holland's unusual rise. It was in the Midwest Executive Ledger, some regional trade publication that had probably been algorithmically recommended based on her past searches for how to trace shell corporations and what happens when a spouse disappears. She almost scrolled past it. Almost. But then she saw the photo. Grainy. Zoomed in from a distance, probably taken at a company event. The man wasn't looking at the camera. He was speaking to someone, back half turned, a drink in one hand. But the stance, the posture, it was him. Her knees didn't buckle. That would have been cinematic. What happened instead was worse. She dropped her coffee. Not the cup, the entire thing. Paper, lid, sleeve, just released it like her brain had temporarily forgotten what hands were for. It hit the tile floor with a soft thud, splashed across her shoes, and no one noticed because, well, this was a pharmacy and everyone was already annoyed with their own problems. She didn't even apologize. Just walked out, phone still in her hand, ignoring the cashier calling after her. Ma'am? You forgot your, okay. She sat in her car, door still open, and zoomed in on the photo until the pixels bled together. The eyes. Paul always had a weird habit of squinting slightly when he listened, like he was calibrating your emotional frequency before deciding if you deserved a response. The photo showed that exact expression. A partial squint. The barest smirk. Not joy. Not arrogance. Just restraint. She read the article 3 times. It spoke of P. Holland as a disruptor in infrastructure investment, of his obsession with efficiency, anonymity, and systems that outlasted personalities, of how he had quietly purchased controlling interest in multiple logistics companies, construction firms, and rail-adjacent tech providers. It called him a phantom on paper, a myth in boardrooms, and a king among engineers. There were no quotes from him, no direct interviews, just analysts speculating and one unnamed executive who called him the architect of the invisible. Rachel blinked hard, her breath fogging the window. She opened a group chat she hadn't used in a year, the roast crew wineglass sparkles, and typed, Rachel, has anyone heard of a guy named P. Holland? Colleen, no. Who? Sarah, sounds fake. Rachel, I think it's Paul. Dana, the article guy? LOL, you're reaching. Rachel, no, look at this. Look at his face. She pasted the link. Seen. Typing. No one replied. She called her sister. He's alive, she said, without preamble. He's rich. And I think he planned this. What are you talking about? Rachel's voice dropped to a whisper, as if the dashboard could hear. Paul, that article. It's him. He didn't just vanish. He rebuilt. Her sister sighed. Ratch. It's been years. Let it go. But Rachel wasn't listening anymore. She spent the next 48 hours spiraling. Reverse image searching the photo. Digging into company filings. Pulling addresses, board memberships, flight records. Even the LLCs tied to Holland systems. Most led to P.O. boxes or third-party proxies. But one document, a minor utilities merger approval buried in a state database, listed a signature, P. Holland. Her pulse spiked. P. Paul Edward. She remembered filling in that middle name on their marriage license. He hated it. Said it sounded like a dead president. The signature wasn't scanned. It was wet ink. Scanned after the fact. A real signature. And the writing? His. Precise. Slanted slightly to the right. Like someone marching uphill. She stared at it for hours. The next morning, she went to the office of a former friend, an attorney who owed her a favor. She slapped the article and the signature down on his desk. Find out everything you can. He looked at her with raised brows. Rachel, why? I need to know how far he's gone. Why? She didn't answer. Just said, bill me. Later that night, she pulled the roast video out of her cloud archive. The one she hadn't watched in years. The one that started it all. Her voice echoed through the speakers as the slideshow rolled. each fake text message and doctored image paired with crowd laughter. She watched her own face, glowing, smug, drunkenly proud of herself. And then she paused the video. Paul's face. Blank. Stone. Not embarrassed. Calculating. She rewound. Played it again. Watched the exact moment something in his expression cracked. Not in pain, but in clarity. Not how could you, but so this is what you are. She sat there, staring into that frozen frame, while the ice in her wine glass melted. It hit her like a freight train. He didn't just leave. He transformed. And every step of it, the silence, the disappearance, the second life, it wasn't a reaction. It was a blueprint. The building didn't look like revenge. It looked like control. All glass and steel, like a blade stabbed into the skyline. Not the tallest in the district, but the sharpest, designed to reflect the sun so brutally that anyone approaching had to squint. The kind of building that didn't need to scream power, because it had been engineered to ignore you. Rachel stood at the revolving doors in a tailored black coat and knockoff heels that already hurt her feet. The taxi ride had been quiet. She'd spent the entire ride rehearsing lines in her head. Firm, but gracious. Calm, but direct. She wasn't here to cause a scene. She was here for a conversation. Closure. Maybe, if she allowed herself the fantasy, an apology. Inside, the lobby was hushed marble and climate-controlled air that smelled faintly of eucalyptus and money. A water feature trickled behind the reception desk. Everything was soft-spoken, polished, clinical. She stepped to the counter, heart pounding. Hi, I'm here to see Mr. Holland. Tell him Rachel is here. The receptionist didn't look up from her monitor. Do you have an appointment? No, but he'll want to see me. I'm afraid Mr. Holland doesn't take walk-ins. Rachel leaned forward. He'll make an exception. Just tell him it's Rachel Hall. Now the woman looked up. No flicker of recognition. No blink of surprise. Just professional blankness, the corporate equivalent of a padded cell. Ma'am, I suggest you take a seat. Or leave. Rachel pulled out her phone, thumbed through the gallery, and slammed it on the desk. A wedding photo. Paul in a cheap tux, her in a sleeveless dress, laughing into the wind. That's your boss. And that's me. Tell him his wife is here. The receptionist glanced at the photo, then at the security guard quietly stepping toward them. I'll ask you to lower your voice. I'm not raising it, Rachel snapped, though her voice cracked. I just want a 5-minute conversation. I'm not crazy. I'm not dangerous. He'll recognize me. The guard approached, a large man in an earpiece and navy suit. She turned to him. Look, I don't want to make a scene, but I'm not leaving until. Ma'am, the guard said calmly. You need to step aside. He didn't threaten. He didn't grab her. He just stood there like a mountain with policy in his veins. Rachel looked back at the receptionist. Still blank. Still unmoved. You people don't even know him, she said, desperate now. He used to quote bad science fiction. He had a crooked pinky from a football injury in '78. He called hot dogs, tube meat, and hated green peppers. I know him. He's not some cold investor robot. The receptionist stood. That was the final shift. It wasn't about safety now. It was about cleanliness. Ma'am, she said softly, like they were both embarrassed. If you do not exit the building, we are prepared to contact legal. Not security. Not the police. Legal. A word so corporate it felt like a steel door slamming shut inside Rachel's chest. The security guard stepped forward just enough for her to understand this wasn't a bluff. She felt it then. Fully. Not rage. Not shame. Just irrelevance. She wasn't even a warning sign anymore. Just a footnote in a forgotten draft. Rachel backed away, slowly, hands slightly raised like she was defusing a bomb. She didn't turn her back to them until she was through the revolving doors. Outside, the sunlight off the building glass blinded her for a second. She stood there on the sidewalk, dazed, watching business people pass without looking her way. A courier zipped by on an electric bike. A mother with a stroller stepped around her, as if she were just another misplaced lamppost. Rachel pulled out her phone and called Dana. Voicemail. She texted, I saw the building. He's real. It's all real. Then, they wouldn't even let me upstairs. She stared at the message bubble. No reply. Later that night, in a hotel room 2 blocks away, she opened a bottle of wine from the minibar and sat cross-legged on the bed, scrolling through Google image results for Eli Holland. There were only a few. Always blurry. Always distant. The press called him notoriously private and inaccessible by design. One article said he was building something called a legacy archive, an internal AI-based database to ensure company knowledge survived employee turnover. A system that remembered everything. She laughed bitterly. Even his software didn't forget. She zoomed in on a photo from a board meeting. 8 men, 2 women, all smiling, most middle-aged. Paul stood slightly to the side, hands folded, neutral expression. Her thumb hovered over his face. He didn't look cold. He looked calm, as if the past was nothing but an equation he'd solved. She finished the bottle. Alone, uninvited, on the wrong side of the glass. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and embossed. No return address. It had that unmistakable weight, like something that had passed through too many curated hands. Rachel stared at it on her doormat for almost an hour before she picked it up. Not out of fear, out of disbelief. Inside was a single card, heavy stock, elegant lettering. The Holland Foundation cordially invites Rachel T., former spouse of Paul Holland, to the annual Founders Gala. She reread the line 3 times. Former spouse. There was no warmth in the phrasing. No with appreciation, no in recognition of. Just fact. Cold, labeled, precise. She looked up, heart thudding in her ears. For a moment, the entire apartment felt like it was tilting. She braced herself on the wall. Why now? Why her? Why this? She RSVP'd, yes, before she had time to second-guess it. She spent the next 12 days preparing like a soldier being deployed behind enemy lines. The dress was rented. A deep navy evening gown that clung too tightly around the ribs, but looked expensive enough to pass inspection. The jewelry was fake. The clutch was borrowed. She paid for a blowout and professional makeup, pretending not to notice how the stylist paused slightly when she said, "It's for a gala." As if asking you. Rachel stood outside the venue alone. A grand marble hall glowing from within. Soft golden lights spilling through arching windows. The muffled sounds of jazz and champagne corks barely reaching the street. Her old circle, what remained of it, waited in a car a block down, engine running. They didn't want to be seen. Not yet. You sure you want to go in there? Dana had asked. Rachel had nodded. He invited me. She approached the entrance slowly. 2 valets stood near the door, back straight, eyes forward. One took her name. Rachel T., she said. The man checked the list, gave a short nod, and stepped aside without ceremony. No welcome. No red carpet smile. Just a signal. You're cleared for entry, but not wanted. The moment she stepped inside, she realized how badly she'd misjudged the scale of this thing. This wasn't a corporate cocktail hour. This was orchestration. Live jazz floated through the air like silk. Chandeliers glowed above towering floral installations. Servers moved like synchronized dancers, offering flutes of champagne and truffle spoons with words like essence and cured over volcanic salt. The guests were radiant, designer gowns, tuxedos with lapel pins that whispered old money. And there, across the room, at the very center of the orbit, stood Paul. She knew him instantly. Trim, measured, silver hair perfectly cut. No flash, no vanity, just clean. He wore a midnight black suit with a charcoal vest and stood among a semicircle of investors and foundation heads who hung on his every word. He laughed, lightly, politely, as if whatever had been said didn't quite amuse him, but he allowed it for their benefit. Then he turned and saw her. His expression didn't change. Not a twitch, not a blink, just a flick of recognition. She felt her chest tighten, not from embarrassment. She'd already crossed that ocean, but from the sudden, suffocating realization that he looked complete. Not cold, not bitter, just finished. She stayed by the wall for 15 minutes, pretending to admire the architecture. No one approached her. Even the waiters passed her with practiced indifference. Her phone buzzed. Dana, you see him? She didn't answer. Instead, she drifted toward the silent auction area, where signed books and framed blueprints were lined up beside glossy plaques with names she didn't recognize. Until one caught her eye. Legacy and Infrastructure, a vision by P. Holland. Her fingers grazed the edge of the plaque. A woman nearby murmured to her husband, "He's just so focused. Never gives interviews. Total mystery man." The husband chuckled. "I heard he used to be a janitor somewhere in the Dakotas. Now he owns half the state's rail network." Rachel felt her stomach drop. They didn't know. They didn't need to know. To them, Paul Holland had always been a man who appeared from nowhere, already powerful. There was no before. No roast party. No slideshow. No humiliation in a wine bar. Just the after, polished and invulnerable. She turned around and found him watching her. Not staring, just noting. He said something to the group beside him and began to walk toward her. The crowd didn't part. It folded away. Rachel's pulse thudded in her ears. As he approached, her mind went blank. She'd imagined this moment 100 different ways. Reunions with yelling, with apologies, with guilt or redemption or just emotion. But now, Face to face, there was nothing in his eyes but clear, practiced detachment. Not hatred, not love, just distance. He stopped 3 feet from her. "Rachel," he said, like noting a weather pattern. "Paul," she replied, her throat dry. "You made it." I didn't know what to expect." He nodded, like that answer didn't matter. Then he glanced at his watch. "Enjoy the gala," he said, and turned. She almost reached for his sleeve. Almost. But the distance between them wasn't 3 feet. It was years. And that night, it had a name. Legacy. She waited until most of the guests had turned toward the stage for some kind of speech. Something about legacy grants, scholarships, urban revitalization. A woman in a gown that cost more than Rachel's car tapped a crystal glass and thanked the Holland Foundation for not just building, but believing. Cameras flashed. A slow, respectful clap rippled through the ballroom. Paul stood near the back now, sipping something amber and expensive from a short glass, half listening. Alone again, always slightly detached. Even here, even now, with the room practically humming in his honor, he remained just a breath outside of it. Rachel moved toward him slowly, cautiously, like approaching a wolf you once mistook for a dog. He turned slightly at the sound of her heels on marble. "Paul." His expression didn't shift. Just that neutral recognition, the way you'd glance at an old receipt before throwing it away. She stood beside him, barely breathing. "I have to ask," she said, voice low. "How did you do all this?" A pause. After what we. She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't have the words, or maybe she didn't have the courage to speak the one thing she'd avoided saying for years. "After what I did to you." Paul looked at her finally. Not through her. At her. Measured, quiet. That same partial squint he used to give city contractors when their budgets didn't add up. "You gave me something," he said calmly. Her eyes flicked back and forth, searching his face. "What?" He leaned in slightly. "Not intimate. Clinical. Total failure," he said. "You gave me that. No one else dared." She blinked. He took another sip of his drink, eyes never leaving hers. "It burned everything I was. All the scaffolding, the reputation, the safety net, every delusion about who I thought I was, and what I thought people would never do to me." He let the words hang for a beat. "I was clean, hollowed out, nothing left to lose." Rachel's throat tightened. "I never meant for it to go that far. Didn't you?" The question landed harder than she expected. He tilted his head. "It was a joke," he said softly. "That's what you told yourself. But I watched you laugh, Rachel. Not at the slideshow. At me. That night wasn't for the guests. It was for you." She opened her mouth, closed it again, swallowed. He didn't stop. People don't destroy what they're afraid to lose. They destroy what they've decided no longer matters. "I was a piece of furniture you resented. Sturdy. Predictable. You needed to prove I could crack." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. He stepped past her toward the edge of the ballroom, as if the moment had passed, as if it meant nothing. She followed. "Why invite me here?" she asked, the desperation seeping in. "Why now?" He turned back slowly. The lights from the chandelier reflected in his glass, catching the rim like a blade. "To show you what failure can build." Her heart hammered. "Is this revenge?" He looked her dead in the eyes. "No," he said. "It's restoration." That word landed like a slap. Not vengeance. Not punishment. Just the act of returning something to its proper place, without sentiment, without apology. He turned away again. But Rachel wasn't ready to let go. She moved closer, voice trembling now. "I was wrong. I was stupid. I thought it was funny. I didn't know." Paul's eyes narrowed. Didn't know what? That it would cost this. There it was. The first honest thing she'd said in a decade. He looked at her for a long, silent moment, as if trying to decide if this version of her was worth replying to. If there was any part of her left that could still understand. Then, calmly, quietly, "You didn't destroy a man, Rachel. You released one." And with that, he turned fully, walking back toward the crowd, toward donors and board members and photographers who knew him only as the architect of something massive and enduring. Rachel stood there, alone, beneath a chandelier older than her marriage, gripping her fake clutch like a lifeline, realizing, slowly, painfully, that she still didn't understand what she had broken. Because it wasn't a man. It was a boundary. And now, the version of Paul she once knew, the one who bought her wine she didn't drink and stayed quiet when she mocked him, was gone. And what stood in his place owed her nothing. The night air hit her like an accusation. Cold, still unforgiving. Rachel stumbled out of the marble hall, her heels clicking unevenly on the stone steps. She caught sight of Paul near the curb, lit by the soft amber glow of a street lamp. He was alone, as always, no entourage, no handlers. Just a man in a perfectly tailored suit who carried silence like a weapon no one saw coming. She hesitated at the door, heart hammering against her ribs. The music from inside was muffled now, the soft hum of jazz reduced to a distant echo, like the sound of a past she couldn't return to. Her rented dress felt too tight, her jewelry too loud. Her entire body was trembling, though she couldn't tell if it was from cold, humiliation, or the gravity of everything she'd just heard. She took one step, then another. "Paul," she called softly, her voice cracking against the dark. He didn't turn. She reached him just as he adjusted his coat, preparing to leave. "Is this revenge?" He finally turned, eyes steady, expression unreadable beneath the glow of the streetlight. "No," he said calmly, like someone answering a routine question. "It's clarity." She swallowed. Her throat was raw. "Then why invite me?" He looked past her for a long moment, past the glowing building, past the reporters still mingling by the valet line, past the place where they once played house and called it love. Then, finally, back into her eyes. "So you'd see the man you made and the man you lost." The sentence struck like a whip. Simple. Precise. Rachel staggered back half a step. Her knees buckled. She sank to the sidewalk slowly, her fingers splaying out on the stone as if to catch herself, but there was nothing to hold on to. Her breath hitched. She shook her head. Once. Twice. "No," she whispered. "No, it can't be true." But it was. Because what stood in front of her wasn't just a man rebuilt. It was a monument. One she'd helped construct, not with love or loyalty, but with fire and failure. A sculpture shaped by abandonment, sharpened by erasure, polished in solitude. Paul, Eli Holland, gave her one final look. Not pity, not cruelty, just recognition. And then he walked. Not away in anger, not away in triumph. Just forward, past her, past the past. Without a word, without a pause, without once looking back. Rachel remained on the sidewalk, hands limp in her lap, mascara trailing down her cheeks, the night air swallowing her sobs. The gala lights behind her flickered, and ahead, in the silence, his footsteps faded, steady, sure, untouchable. She had her answer. She had her clarity, and it destroyed her.